Okay, welcome back to episode 11 of Ag Inspired Conversations, and my name is Tommy Heffernan, and the concept is very simple. It's to have interesting conversations with people doing inspiring things in agriculture. And this evening I'm going across the Irish Sea to the UK to chat to my first practicing veterinarian on this. So I'm very excited to talk about life in veterinary practice, something I'm very, I suppose, missing a little bit myself, and that's Claire Whittle. Claire is somebody that I've followed on social media for a long time and really piqued my curiosity around her interest in regenerative agriculture and veterinary. Welcome, Claire, first of all, to Ag Inspired Conversations. How are you keeping?
I'm fine, thank you. Busy day.
You had a busy day in practice. We'll get to talk a little bit about life and practice in a little bit. I suppose with everybody that I've had a conversation with, Claire, I've tried to go back and understand, how they got into agriculture, or in your case, veterinary. So tell people a little bit about yourself. You didn't come from a farming background, but you're very passionate now about farming.
Yeah, no, not from a farming background at all. In fact, grew up in Liverpool and on the Wirral, so very different background, I suppose. And I think when I went to vet school, my intentions were to do, I probably should go back before then, really. I had no intention of going to vet school. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't think I knew what I wanted to do when I left school, which I think a lot of people do know, and particularly with being a vet, you get a lot of people going into it quite young. But I didn't know, and I did French and Spanish, English and art were my A-levels, and general, whatever, I've forgotten what they call it now, general sciences or something.
So you had a broad you had a broad brush to start off with.
Yeah.
But then obviously there was a decision made at some stage that, okay, I want to work with animals, or I want to be a vet. And I've heard you say before that you talked about veterinary nursing or veterinary itself. So what was the thing that piqued that interest that maybe I want to work with animals? But, what stage did you get your SH1T together and decide this is what I want to do?
I thought it would just be a really nice job. I love animals. We had a dog growing up, but I tried to get down the nursing route, and then just couldn't do that. And I'm not sure. I went to work in the kennels for a little while,
okay.
And I really enjoyed it. And I think I just thought it seems like a really nice job, and I suppose it changes slightly when you get to vet school in terms of your feelings around, I think everyone thinks it's this dream job and it's all cuddling animals and stuff like that. And actually that's not a very realistic view of it.
It's a very tough job. Small animal veterinaries are really, I have a lot of friends who are working as small animal vets, and and I did a lot of small animal practice. It's a high pressure job. It's a different level of intensity. I mean, people's pets now are very much like their children. And I found that really, that was, I was in the mode, I liked the medicine and the surgery, but I wasn't really, I lost that passion for it because it can be very overwhelming. I found that was my own experiences with it.
No, definitely. I think you're right. And I think I started off at uni thinking that I just wanted to do small animal, and you kind of go through the motions, don't you, where you have to do work experience doing everything. I dabbled a tiny bit before I went to university, but it was literally just to get in because you have to do your week or so here and there. I didn't do an awful lot on the farms. I just kind of watched a bit of milking, dabbled around a little bit. And then it was only in my first year when I was looking for a farm near home, and I actually went to the Liverpool University's farm. So I had to do, I think it was a week there to start off with, which I did. And I think getting there was a real sort of eye-opener for me, because I think I just hadn't realised how much was involved with it before. I couldn't even tell the difference between silage or grass or hay or straw or any of those things at that particular point in time. But really good teachers, and I think that's one of the things with farm vetting as well, is you learn a lot from the farmers. And John Cameron, who's the farm manager there, he was just very patient. He took his time. I asked lots of questions and he gave me lots and lots of answers. And then it just encourages more and more questions. And actually seeing the way he cared about the cows was massively inspiring for me, really. We're carving a cow within one night, and it was just the time that he took. I don't think I've ever carved a cow in that length of time. It was such a long period. And when I think back now and look at the care that he took over that, there was no carving aid involved, none of that. It was all very much all about the cow. I think that's really important, and I think that taught me a lot as well. And again, I went to do lambing placement. I went down to Llandrindod Wells to a family down there, and they just, again, had endless patience with me. And it was it was really, really nice. And I think what you learn in university, the sort of very theoretical stuff and how that translates into practice is very, very different. And I love that relationship that you build. I think I started to realise that you can get really close relationships. I still go and stay with my lambing family. I went down to them a couple of weekends ago and camped down there. And it's just really nice. I mean, Rupert, who's a young lad there, he was 11 when I first went, and he's like 20, 21, 22, and it's just like seeing him grow. He said he's got a girlfriend, and I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can cope with this. So yeah, I think that sort of, all of that sort of experience really sort of played into it for me, really.
Isn't it amazing what farmers teach you about farming? And I suppose maybe like I'm not too far in my office now from one of my original clients. He's heading into his 80s, but he was a massive mentor for me, just around his attitude towards the cows, towards his farming business. It was just extraordinary. I learned so much from him, and maybe I didn't thank him enough over the years, but great conversations. He was an extremely wise person for a start in all aspects of life, and I found that with farming. Sometimes when we have conversations about farming, it's seen down the rung of the ladder as regards business and technicality. But it's certainly a big businesses now, but there's massive wisdom there if we listen to it. And last week, that's myself and Martin were discussing just that. That relationship with people is so important, because as a veterinarian, and maybe you see this when you're trying to advise people to do something or another, you've got to build the trust and have that there with somebody, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's the thing with our job. I mean, you can be, I think, as clever as you like, and that's the thing with vet school is, you need 3 A's and you'll get into vet school, and that's it. But communication is probably 95% of our job. Yeah. And actually, if you've got a group of coughing cows as an example, you might have an idea of what's going on in your head, but if you can't find out any history from that farmer, or you can't have that conversation and build that relationship up, that is what your job is. And it is dealing with people. Although you deal with animals, it is very much a people job. And I think you can forget that sometimes. And it's brilliant. I love the relationships that I have with clients.
And so and this is from picking up bits and following you on social media, you seem to have a real passion for cows now. For somebody who's come from the city and not from a dairy farm, you seem to have a real respect for cows. And, so did that just happen over time, or was there kind of a moment when you went, yeah, these animals are pretty fucking cool?
I think, again, I'll probably go back to the farm. So after I did my week's work experience, I went back there and did a few more weeks. And then I ended up going there for a summer of so our second year summer, we used to have off. And I went and worked there for nearly 4 months. So did a bit of young stock work and stuff. And I think I started to realise, and had never thought before, that cows would even have personalities. Yeah. And I think, when you realise, and I was looking after bulling heifers basically, and the young stock, and it was brilliant. And there was one cow, 235, Tinkerbell, wow. who I called that. And she was like my baby. Like, I would go and she'd sit down in the field, and I could go and sit down with her and have my lunch. Like, I'd lean against her and eat my sandwiches. She'd come up to me every morning. And yet she just became like, hadn't realised until that point, and how some of them are shy, and they're just like they're a lot like people, and there's all these different characters there, and sort of picking them out. And I think that was sort of a bit of a realisation for me, because I just thought, well, a cow is just a cow, it's just a herd animal, they're all the same. But I think that sort of made me realise that they're sentient beings, I guess, and having that nice that feeling around them is just, and I've just grown to love it. I've got everything cow. I own everything cow related. It's ridiculous.
I can see that. I can see that from following you on social media. You're a big cow fan. But it's interesting you say about understanding cows, and even as a student you picked up that. It took me about, like, I'm qualified 20 years now. I know I don't look and all that, but it took me a long time, Claire, to figure that out, to start understanding cows. And really, and I think I discussed this last week with Martin, he's really into cow behavior as well, from a productive point of view and performance point of view. That this is going to be a key thing we need to understand better as we build systems for cows in the future, and not just for the cow, but for the industry as a whole, and the perceptions people have of it. So it was interesting you picked that up at a young age, and I see this time and time again with people who don't come directly from an ag background make extremely good vets, because you come with a blank sheet almost. you don't have any preconceptions about what things are. And maybe that, you know, you can see it from a different angle. Now you're in it now for, how long are you qualified, by the way? I should have asked you.
6 years. Yeah. 6.
Oh, 6 years. So you're the real deal now. You know, you have all the inexperience behind you. No more mistakes. But you know, to have that insight at that stage was key. And do you think that was in relation to maybe you came with a fresh perspective to farming? You saw it through your eyes for the first time. You weren't sort of you'd no past experiences, so you didn't have any preconceptions, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't have any. I didn't really know what to expect. I literally thought cows went out to grass, got milked, and that was pretty much it. And that was the end of it. But no, I didn't have any preconceived ideas about what farming was or what people were like in farm. I think there's like quite an old-fashioned view from the public sometimes over what farming is. And I do think there is that, you know, you see cows in a field, oh, they go in, they get milked, and then what else happens? But there's so much more to it. And I think that's what piqued my interest as well. I mean, I knew dogs and cats, you know, people have pets, that's the standard, but farming's just got so many different layers to it. And there's different farms doing different things and different ways there's so many different ways of doing things. And yeah, it's massive. It's massive. I have a huge respect for farmers and farm managers and what they do in farming, really, because I don't think I could do it.
I have to say, even talking to you this evening, I know I talked to you on the phone last week and following you, you have a very positive attitude as well, which is quite infectious. And so as a young veterinarian then, how were the first couple of years in practice? You know, because there'll be lots of highs, but there can be lots. It can be tough in practice when you leave that setting and that clinical setting of the safety of the veterinary hospital when you're a fully fledged vet. How did you fare out in your first couple of years in practice?
So when I graduated, I actually moved down to Dorset. So I moved to a practice called Friars Moor Vets, which is in North Dorset. I was there for 2 years. And what I will say for anyone who is, and you hear it over time and time again, but about having support in your first couple of years out, it's massively, massively important. And I started with another vet actually at the same time. So both of us graduated together and we started together. So actually all of those things that were like a massive problem or a big hill or we didn't understand, we go to each other at the end of the day and be like, did you understand what that's about? Or after a meeting or things like that. And that was really useful. And the partners in that business were absolutely brilliant with me. Like they took you out to places, they showed you. If you had any problems, they would come and support you. You had regular reviews, things like that to see how you were feeling. And I think we've got interns at the moment. We've had 2 new interns start last week. And I was talking to them today about, they were just scanning a few cows. And I remember, I scan cows now. I don't even really think about it, PDs and things. And I remember scanning when I first started and thinking, I'm never going to be able to get this. Like, and you'd have days where you do really well, and then you go and try it. You couldn't find its uterus the next day, and that was constant. And it was just always, it was up and down. And I think the ups and downs still happen. I just don't know if your response to it is as extreme as what it used to be. Like, and I used to take, I mean, if something went wrong, you take a lot of blame on yourself, but ultimately, I think that changes over time, but maybe because you have to protect yourself a little bit, and maybe just because you get used to the trials and tribulations of farming and vetting.
You do seem like somebody who is very positive in nature in general, though. I think, is that something that is the glass half full, or that's the perception I have?
Yeah, I think it is. I do always try and remain on the positive side, really, because you can't. What else can you do? If it's laugh or cry, it's always laugh.
Yeah, I get that, to be fair, I really do. So you said to me today you had a busy day in practice. So let's talk about practice now, where you are now. What does a day in practice look like for you? Is it James Herriot style stuff, or?
I suppose some days are. Yeah, some days are James Herriot style, but I suppose it's a bit different, isn't it? We have, so mornings for me, we're a 90% dairy practice. Okay. So it's pretty much a lot of routine fertility work. So that's usually my mornings taken up with fertility stuff, and then calls, anything else going on, general veterinary, bit of TB testing, very little TB testing. I am very, very lucky, and I do appreciate that. We have quite a few TB testers who that is solely their job, so I do a little less. But yeah, carvings, what I've had this afternoon, had another routine this afternoon, so depending on, some clients are afternoon milking, we might do some routines in the afternoon, and then a few sick cows to see and things like that as well. So yeah, I love it.
if you had a favorite call, what is it? Is it calving a cow? So I'm following you obviously on social media and watching what you're doing, and you really get stuck into those calvings. Is it
Yeah, I
is
love carving cows. I think every single one is completely different, and it's always a puzzle. And I just like the puzzle of trying to figure out what's going on, because you're basically blindfolded, aren't you? And you've just got to kind of figure out what's happening. And I find it, when you have a successful carving, it's the most joyous thing. It's just like, I've got a cow, I've got a little baby cow.
Yeah, it's
Do you sing the Lion King?
You never get sick of that live calf coming out,
Yeah.
and especially when it's, you know, it's touch or go, it's something difficult. And my parents were teachers. I had my grandparents were farming and stuff, and I wasn't from a farm. And I remember I didn't see as much practice maybe as I should have when I was in college. But you know, one of my first real calvings was on my own as a vet, like, and that absolute terror and sorting. I'll never forget getting those legs up and getting that calf and sorting it out. It was such a great feeling. I suppose what piqued my curiosity, Claire, particularly is following you, is you've started discussing more and more this whole area of regenerative agriculture. And I first came across regenerative agriculture, I think it was a friend of mine shared Alan Savory's TED Talk, which a lot of people would have seen. Immensely powerful for so many reasons. I mean, I think it was one of the things that hit me was, and it's probably nothing to do with regenerative agriculture, but you know, he's the culling of the elephants as part of what he was doing as a scientist, and then he's absolute regret and terror that was the wrong thing to do, and he's spending his life now correcting that. I think there was a lesson there, but he spoke about it. That was the first time I heard about it. I suppose because of the circles I operate here in Ireland in agriculture, the conversations are becoming more and more frequent around regenerative agriculture and its role. Some people will say that it's, you know, it's just a phase, and some people say this is the solution for farming of the future. So I suppose to give people some perspective, when I say to you, what is regenerative agriculture just as a whole, how would you define it, or what's your thought process around that?
I guess I would say that it's farming principles. So it's probably a system of farming principles, and I think the aim of it is to sort of try and increase biodiversity, probably improve soils, watersheds, I guess sort of enhancing ecosystems and things like that along the way, thinking of the farm as a whole rather than as individual parts. And I think the overall aim is to try and sort of capture carbon in the soil as far as I can guess. And then but I suppose with plants and plant biomass as well above the ground, and you've got soils. And then there's some indication that it can reverse atmospheric accumulation of carbon, but I think just trying to stabilize it even at that point in time. But I think that's the thing. It's about increasing biodiversity and in many different ways, and thinking of those ecosystems or farms as ecosystems in themselves. So that's from anything from the farmer himself, who's part of that system. So it's a lot of it about social sciences in there. There's a lot about business, agroforestry, agroecology, and then, like you said, Alan Savory's holistic management and organic farming. There's lots of different schools of thought that play into it. I don't think it has I don't think it's a sort of one size fits all thing. I think it's quite very broad.
I think it is hard to find that clear definition, but I think you've covered it well, that it is multidisciplinary. It encompasses a lot of disciplines on the farm, but it is the farm as a whole. Where did you what piqued your interest as a vet? You know, first of all, you're into cows. Now you've discovered regenerative agriculture, and we'll talk about how you incorporate both maybe in the future. But where did you come across it first?
So I think you'll probably agree with me that farming's had a lot of bad press in the past few years. It just seems to have been all negative, and I think being a positive person is trying to find that positivity in it. And I think I was getting lots of questions. Obviously, I don't come from farming, so a lot of my friends are from the city and from urban areas. So I was getting lots of questions about farming and welfare and the environment. And I feel like I could always defend the welfare stuff down to the ground. Like I can talk about animal welfare all day and the farms, and some of the farmers that we have and what they do with their cows is phenomenal. But I was finding it more difficult to sort of balance the environmental impacts of farming sometimes. And it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily what I do as a vet, but I was like, well, I'm in this, I work in agriculture, and there's got to be something in there. And I think there was a conversation I had with a client of mine about, I think we were doing their herd health plan actually. And he's got some really, really good looking cattle. They look really well. And I asked the question, as you do as part of your health plan, what you feed them in the winter. And I think the question was, oh, it's just silage. And I was like, well, they look really well on bloody silage. And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, why don't you feed, like, because most people will feed some kind of grain or corn or something in the wintertime, just filling in the plan. And he was like, no, it's just part of our system, and we're on a countryside stewardship scheme. And I think I just started asking more questions about their farming system, because I really did I was like, this sounds really interesting. What are they doing here? It's all pasture-based system. And then I think the Farmer's Wife had the Wilding book by Isabella Tree, Georgina. So she said, have a read of this and see what you think of it. And I read that book, and for me, that was a bit of a sort of light bulb moment, really, about what we can do in farming to try and and it's a really good positive message for farming when there's a lot of negativity around it. So I think that's probably where it started for me, really.
Do you find that hard to listen to, especially if you're so connected, your friends are back in the city, and do you find that hard to deal with, that you're sort of defending agriculture all the time, that that it's sort of on the back foot? Because you wrote a piece recently to it was a veterinary journal, I believe, in response to what was a really, I don't want to get into the tit for tat about, you said, he said, we all said, but it was a really negative piece. It was really short. It was really short-sighted in its view of agriculture, I felt. But you wrote a very powerful piece about it. But you find it hard, and I get this from Irish farmers a lot, is that it's sort of wearing people down. That agriculture, the environment, welfare, maybe COVID maybe sort of helped things a little bit, because people realised how important food was and food production. But you find it hard to go back to the city and defend agriculture? It's something you're proud to do. You obviously take time to write letters in response to other letters. So you're obviously, it's something you're passionate about. It takes a lot of energy out of somebody to do that. It's something I do myself. I'm quite balanced, but I do, in my private time, have those debates with people that aren't farming. Do you find that hard?
I really enjoy it.
Okay.
So I really like defending it, and I think we should defend it. And I think I do feel very passionately about British agriculture. I feel that we are, we've made massive steps in the past 50 years. I think it's a really exciting time to be part of agriculture. And I quite like just telling someone that they're wrong.
Okay, so you like the debate. Good.
Yeah, no, I do enjoy the debate about it. And, I've got friends who are vegan. I've got friends, I've got friends from all different walks of life, different diets, different lifestyles, have different opinions on lots of various things. And when we talk about farming, it's one thing that I can get particularly passionate about. But I think it's important, and I'm not saying, I think this movement towards vegan gets a lot of negativity around it, but I think it's probably made people look a bit more about where their food comes from. And I think that, again, that's really important that we do that. And, supermarkets are starting to be more aware of it as well, which is why they demand sort of certain welfare parameters from their farming, from their farms and from the people that they work with as well. And I think people are really interested now where their food is coming from. And if we can paint a really good picture of agriculture and how, in this country and how it works, I think that's a really good story. And I think the regenerative agriculture side for me supports that in a lot of ways. I think it's really important. I think there's this expectation from the public, I think, that farmers and landowners have this positive impact on their own environment as well, on the environment that they work in and the environment around them. So I think it's a really exciting time.
I totally agree with you. I'm also a reasonably positive person, I would hope to think, and I think it is a really exciting time in agriculture. And I think some of the research that I'm seeing, not just on regenerative agriculture, but technology and all those areas, that food and agriculture, because it's such an important area, is going to be so key. I started my Ag Inspire conversations with a guy called Bruce Thompson, a dairy farmer who I think you've been in contact with as well, fascinated with dung beetles. So let's take it forward to maybe the dung beetle story, and the vet's role in regenerative agriculture, something certainly that's not on the curriculum currently, but maybe in 10 or 20 years time they'll be reading the book by Claire Whittle on regenerative agriculture and veterinary. Maybe that's where we're going, maybe that's where you're going. So the dung beetle is obviously, is important in this whole ecosystem of farming and their role, but you're sharing all these pictures of dung beetles as well. So talk to me a little bit about maybe the dung beetle and maybe the wider role for veterinarians, because a lot of veterinarians will follow and listen to this around regenerative agriculture, because it seems like it's, a farming system far removed from the day job of maybe calving the cow or the displaced abomasum. What's the vet's role look like, Claire? How can vets engage in this?
So I think for me, parasite control is probably a really easy way into it. Yeah, and the reason that is, I think historically, and I'm definitely guilty of this, and I don't know if you feel the same, but parasite control is something that I feel generally been out of my hands in terms of, so wormers have always been really, really cheap coming from trade. So I've tended not to get involved in what people are buying or what farmers are using. Obviously you have to fill it in the health plan, but it's more questions where I feel like I've asked them what they're using rather than something I get involved with. Okay. And I think you'll be the same as me. I was never ever told about dung beetles at university. Oh. There was not. It was just like, these are your wormers, these are what you can use to worm cows, and it's all about cow health or livestock health or dog or cat health or whatever. It doesn't necessarily think about this more sort of holistic view of your farms as ecosystems, which we were talking about before. And I think the dung beetle for me is because the reason it's an easy way in is because so dung beetles are ace basically. They control sort of nuisance fly. I'll give you a brief overview. They control nuisance fly populations. So they themselves sort of eat the liquid portion of the feces. So as they do that, they dry out that dung on the pasture. So therefore they're effectively sort of pasture vacuum cleaners, I think I've called them before in the past. They also carry these little tiny mites on them, which literally do eat fly eggs. So they eat nuisance fly eggs. So because they've eaten the liquid portion, it makes it unsuitable for nuisance flies to lay their eggs. And then they also pull organic matter down into the soil as well. So that muck that sits on the surface of the ground, which is full of carbon. You want that under the ground. And some dung beetles do that for free. So they're tunneling varieties of dung beetle. And there are dwellers who literally dwell in the poo. And these tunneling ones...
Are the dwellers like the lazy dung beetles, and then the other guys doing all the work? Or what's happening there?
So they just sit in there and just eat the muck, whereas the other ones, I think, I could be getting this wrong, and but they pull it down into the earth, and then they lay their eggs in the little balls that they make. So, but then that is basically carbon sequestration, I think, in effect, then pulling that down into the ground. And then the problem is we've lost about 50% of them. So I think we had over 60 species in the UK, and now we're down to about 30. Okay. So, and I think some of that is because we have less animals outdoors. So there are overwintering varieties that need animals on pasture over winter. We don't really have that in a lot of places anymore. Most people will tend to house their animals. And also avermectin. So avermectin use is responsible for quite a lot of dung beetle deaths, unfortunately, which is where I sort of came in with a bit of an interest in it, really, in terms of, because a lot of farmers, again, will use avermectin because they are cheap. They're easy. They've got, long persistence, but that makes them all the more detrimental for dung beetles. And what happens is, when the muck comes out, the dung beetles will still fly into the muck. And in fact, I think they're actually more drawn to ivermectin muck, which is a bit of a shame. And then when they get there, they can't reproduce. So although you may see them in the muck, they may not reproduce for the following years going forward. So I'm not saying in any way that we shouldn't use avermectins. I think we really should. But the reason I think it's a good way in is because it makes financial sense potentially to be doing things like fecal egg counts for farmers rather than just using wormers all the time. There's increasing levels of resistance to wormers, which we know, we've seen it in sheep, and now we know that that's coming out in cattle as well. So in terms of sustainable use of wormers, it's probably fecal egg counts are the way that people want to be moving towards, I would say, if you're thinking more regeneratively about the way you're farming or more holistically about your approach. Yeah.
I think it's really just good common sense as well, because there's a huge brewing problem around resistance. Yeah. You can't blame a farmer or anybody for wanting the easier option, which is a dose, of course, because have you been in Ireland, Claire, actually? Have you visited Ireland?
Only briefly.
Okay. parasites are a rate limiting problem on a lot of our farms at the moment. They're causing huge issues, have been in sheep, now they've moved to cattle, and we just have to, we've new legislation coming from Europe as well, changing how we use these products. So it's just good science and sense to be talking about it. But I suppose the rollout of that, it started an area, I know, talking to some of my friends who are vets, that, that's the sandals and the hemp jacket kind of territory.
Yeah.
But are you practically rolling out this with your clients? Are these conversations moving from intellectual debate, maybe at the side of the van before you finish a call, or are they actually moving into sort of what look like structured health plans or part of structured health plans?
Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do now. Hopefully for next year, we're going to have some better sort of integrated parasite control planning available. So that will look like there'll be questionnaires, and then hopefully for each individual farm, we'll have basically a plan for each farm. So at the moment, I've got 3 farms on trial. So I've got 1 beef farm, 2 dairy farms on trial where I'm just doing fecal egg counts. And so far this year, and bearing in mind it's August now, I think only 1 of them's needed to worm based off fecal egg counts, and that was off the back of a lungworm. So I did an in-house bearman because we had some coughing cows, which is probably a risk. But then again, what they'll do is vaccinate next year for lungworm, and then so things like that. And that's like, I would imagine most, definitely a couple of those farms will probably have wormed twice by now and probably haven't needed to do so. So again, you're reducing that chance of resistance in the wormers all the time. And we don't, once they're gone, we don't have anything else backed up, do we? It's a bit like we're going back to our antibiotics. We've done so well in reducing antibiotic usage by preventative measures. It's another level, and I enjoy it as well. It's something that's probably scared me a little bit, parasites, because it's like you worry about them, don't you? It's something that's just sort of sat there, and I'm not quite sure how they work, and I'm still a little bit unsure about what I'm going to do about housing doses. But you've got to learn a little bit by trial and error, I think. And then the more, when I've been talking about this trial to other farmers as well, I mean, obviously you get some people who are really interested, and you get some. I'm not going to push anyone down a route they don't want to go down, but it's nice to be able to have those conversations, and to be, the more you also learn while you're doing it, don't you? And if you can speak more confidently about something, I think people will buy into that idea a little bit better.
It's really powerful stuff. You also said to me in a message, because we had been tic-tacking about doing this interview, that it sort of reinvigorated your interest and passion for veterinary again, almost giving you a second win, which is an important thing to happen in your career. And sometimes you need a 3rd and a 4th and a 5th win, but has it reignited your kind of passion again to keep learning and because this is something that's consistent, maybe, and it's my own bias for the people that I want to talk to, but everyone is curious that I've spoken to, curious about the different areas of agriculture that they're in, and you seem like a curious person. So are you somebody who needs that challenge all the time? You talked about the uncomfortableness maybe of not knowing all the facts to start, but you're ready to take it on. Is that part of it, Claire?
Yeah, I think it is. I did, so on the back of what I've been looking into in terms of the environmental challenges around farming, I looked at what I could do to try and improve, I suppose, open my eyes a little bit more and try and understand it a little bit better. So last year I did a postgraduate certificate in conservation medicine. I've not got the result yet. I've just handed in my final piece of work. Okay. So that was at Edinburgh University, and that was basically looking at what I'm trying to think how to describe it now. That's probably it's an interdisciplinary approach. So it's a various things looking at the conservation of biodiversity, basically, but from a veterinary perspective. So it includes the fields of animal health, human health, and ecosystem health. So it's a bit like a triad, really, and how you integrate all these things together. And I really enjoyed the course. It was quite hard. I had to try and fit it in my own time as well around work. They gave me a few study days, but ultimately it was kind of up to me to do it. But it was really interesting, and it wasn't just about cows. I mean, I was looking at populations of Arctic foxes, barn owls, various different things, and actually it just really sort of piqued that interest. And from that, then obviously now I'm probably looking for the next thing to go and do. But yeah, no, it was a really good course. I wanted to do something. I didn't want to, I know a lot of people do things like the DBR, which I think is great, but I just wasn't quite for me. I wanted something that was going to be a little bit different. And I think that's what that did for me, basically.
Wow, that's really interesting stuff. So what else besides the dung beetle, and what other areas did you think that are maybe key, some of the key focus areas for vets to maybe start understanding, thinking about when we think about livestock systems and regenerative agriculture and our role maybe in that whole picture?
Yeah, so I think obviously, like say, going back to the parasites, that's a pretty easy way in because there's lots of reason behind it. But I think there's other things we can get involved with. So I think from an animal perspective, I think there's things like nutrition as well. So there's lots of people talking about things like diverse swords, diverse lays, and herbal lays and that kind of thing. And I just think we often look at I often do look at a field of cows and think, doesn't that look bloody lovely? And then I think about it when you start thinking about it a bit more and you think, okay, so it's a field of cows on ryegrass. How natural is that? I don't know. Like how, you know, you see cows at the edge of fields, you see them picking on trees and picking on hedges and browsing. And you think if you put them in a field of ryegrass, yes, they'll eat that. But how, you know, if we go back to welfare, is that really freedom to express that natural behavior to a certain extent? Do you know, I don't know, there's a lot in it, and they will pick different plants and different plants have different qualities. So there's definitely been proven some anthelmintic properties in things like chicory we know about already for sheep. And then I think, again, we look at, there's trace elements and things in trees. There's loads of different things where you see cattle picking at things and it does make you think, what are they looking for something in particular? So I think nutrition is again, I don't know a lot about it, and we started at our practice, we started a regenerative agriculture group. So we had about 40 farmers or so turn up and tune in for our first meeting, which was just talking about what regenerative agriculture actually was. But the plan is obviously going forward to do some more animal related stuff, and hopefully each meeting I'll have to do a bit more research on each thing. So I think welfare is another thing. I think genetics as well, you know, types of breeds of animals that you have in your system. Like, is it the right type of animal for that system? If you want to be a grass-based system, you know, it's probably not going to be a Holstein you're going to be looking for. How animals perform in different environments, keeping animals overwintering, all those kind of things. I think it's vast. I don't know where you take it.
No, and I think you're right. It is huge when you get into it. I have an interest in mixed species swords. I have a huge interest in nutrition and rumen health. Coming from, you know, I work outside of Ireland as well, but coming from Ireland, that pastoral system around monocultures, I feel there'll be changes there driven by the environment, the different things. And it's very important though that we find a balance, and it's not, you know, there's no divisions created. I often find when, this is my own personal experience. Now, I'm very concerned about the environment because I have 5 young kiddies and this is the world they're going to grow up in. But I do find when the environmental debate starts, even within farming, it can be very segregated. And I think it's about open inclusion, including everybody in the conversation, and not, you know, pigeonholing people into you're doing the wrong thing, you're doing the right thing, this is the way forward. It's open conversation. And it's people like you who have the right personality and the passion and interest, we need to be leading those conversations. So I really want you to keep up that work, because it's important to have people inspiring us to do the right thing. Just on the greater environment thing, when it has come up, it's something that certainly is coming up on my radar in the stuff I read, my thought process, maybe because of the age I am and I have a family, and I'm getting pretty, that's a little bit scared about what you're seeing. You're seeing the Arctic melting, you know, but you want to be pragmatic enough about it and understanding what it is. Is it something that's driven you as well, the environment? I know you're an outdoorsy person as well, like myself, and get out and about. Is it something you're concerned about, the whole environment thing as a whole? Is it something that drives you towards regenerative agriculture, or do you think we're okay on the environmental front?
No, I think it is something that does concern me. I think it's all of this stuff we've been talking about, basically, that's just sort of brought to light sort of impacts on, well, in all walks of life. And I think it's really wrong the way farming is being blamed for so much stuff, because ultimately it is producing food. And, you know, the way I feel like the transport industry and things like that get away with murder in comparison. And it makes, it worries me. I mean, I haven't got kids, but that doesn't mean I don't want to leave behind something better for the people who are going to have to live in the world. And you do hear some pretty horrendous headlines about, you know, things like there's only 50 harvests left and all that kind of stuff. And it does sort of make you go, I don't know, what do we do about it? And I think, and that's the thing, I'm exactly the same as you. You don't want to scare people off doing things or making changes, because even if you're making really small change, I mean, even in my own personal life, I'm not massively green. I try and do my bit if I can. You recycle like everyone does. I've stopped using bottled shampoo, much to my hairdresser's dismay. I now use shampoo bars, which apparently are really drying for my hair.
You are thinking about it then. You are thinking about it, because I had an idea for an article or blog, and it was the environment, I'm the problem. And it was really me looking at as a person and my lifestyle being the problem. And ultimately, how would you get me to change? Because it's lots of me's that need to change. So I think you're a step ahead of me on the shampoo.
I do think we need to look at ourselves. You are right though there. We have to look at ourselves and how we work with the world as well. How often we do travel, plane flying, that kind of, going on holiday, not saying that people shouldn't go on holiday again, but maybe just thinking a little bit more. I read an article that was saying like 2/3 of the flights out of the UK are for stag and hen do's and things like that. And it just makes you think, oh, do we need to be doing that? And again, I think about a lot more now than I think I used to about where I get my food from and what sort of food that I'm buying and how far it's traveled, all those kind of things. I think food for me has probably always been quite important. Even if farming wasn't when I was younger, food always was. I mean, my dad's side of the family is Indian, and I think food is a massive part of that culture. Any occasion is always about food. So if it's a wedding, you have food. If someone's died, you have food. Everyone's feeding each other all the time, and cooking as well. So cooking's very much a family affair. So why have one person to make a samosa when you can have 10? So it was always about food. And I think my dad's always been very much about really good quality ingredients and thinking about, it's very easy to go and buy cheap food, but I think people just need to think a little bit better about what they're buying. I mean, I buy cheap cuts of meat because it's, chicken thighs taste a hell of a lot better to me than chicken breast does. And it costs about a quarter of the price. I've just had oxtail for my dinner. Like, there's the offcuts and things like that. We're so wasteful, I think, as a nation as well. And I think it's really, really important that we come back to British food and eating those bits of things that, make people a bit scared, or, buying things in bulk. Like I bought half a lamb off a client. It came with a kidney. I was delighted. And it's gone in the freezer, and you just have bits at a time. I do eat less meat now, I'd say, but I do eat a lot better meat, and I do as well. It feels like it's better meat anyway, when you know where it's come from and you know what you're buying. I think that's really important.
Two last questions for you. Your Indian heritage, I was surprised that the most dairy cows in the world many years ago I learned were in India. So have you gone to India and seen Indian dairy farming and agriculture there? Have you worked in India?
No, I went for the first time last year, actually. So my family are Anglo-Indian. Okay. So they grew up, my surname is Whittle, that's my granddad's name on my dad's side. So several generations ago, I can't quite remember that when Britain had, before Britain got independent of, India got independent of Britain, they apparently tried to integrate the sort of two communities. So you had, I'm not entirely sure of the entire background of it, but it sounds to me like maybe like British Army officers and things like that were paid to marry into sort of Indian families to try and sort of integrate the two, and then you ended up with this sort of group of people who were neither Indian or neither British really. So my grandparents grew up in a gold mining town in South India and led a very, very British lifestyle before moving to the UK. So my granddad said they did have, like, they had things like cows in the garden. You had it for everything. So you milk the cow, then I don't know if they could eat cow, but so chickens, again, everything was dual purpose. Yeah. So and that was, everyone did that everywhere. And when we went over there, we did go down to see where they used to live. Actually, it was really lovely. But we did see a dairy farm, and it was actually in the middle of all the tea plantations in a place called Manar. So in the jungle, basically, and it was zero grazing. So they had these dairy cows, and they're all tied up. And there are potentially welfare implications there, but it's only what we were doing sort of 30, 40 years ago.
a lot that clear is we look at different systems in different countries, different cultures, and you make assumptions, but culturally you must understand where people are and where people are going to. So yeah. Exactly.
and they were feeding them on just all the jungle plants. So they just literally went out in the morning, they cut down all the leaves off all the trees, and they just took them to the cows. And they were happy cows as far as I could tell. But it was really nice to see. Like you say, completely different ways of doing things, and they can't let you can't just let a cow out in the middle of a jungle because it will get eaten back. We don't have tigers here that we need to worry about, but they were a bit worried about things like tigers. So
different risk analysis to be done for each farm in different countries of the world. Claire, you have a wonderful attitude, and I'm so glad to talk to you, because I have been following you for a while, and sometimes you see people on social media, and it might be the real person, or it might be a small glimmer of them, or it might be their actual personality, but you're totally reflective of what I've expected to talk to. You have a wonderful attitude, and you're incredibly positive, and I think you're a credit to the veterinary profession. Your own lessons and inspirations in your career to date. I know it's only a young career, and I think you've still got that book to write, Claire Whittle, Regenerative Agriculture book. But what have your lessons been, maybe for younger people, not just vets, but younger farmers? What have been your inspirations? What are the bits that keep you going? And who's the people who've inspired you? It's a hard question, I know.
It is a very hard question. I think I would probably go back to university again, and probably go back to John Cameron. I think he was brilliant. I think a lot of the, I shouldn't want to say older, but the older partners in my sort of younger veterinary career. So yeah, just brilliant people. And even now as well, I have a great team of people around me. I feel very, very lucky. They're massively clever. And I think I probably suffer a little bit with imposter syndrome sometimes when it comes to talking to them, because I do feel a bit like, yeah, someone might figure out that I'm not actually supposed to be a vet one day.
We all suffer from imposter syndrome. We all do. It's about getting over that imposter syndrome, and realizing who you are and what your abilities are, and the abilities are in us. I think that's the key thing. So you've had lots of inspiration in your career. I wish you well. I'll be following your journey very closely. I think the work that you're doing around regenerative agriculture is really interesting. And not just that, I know you're doing all sorts of fantastic work in your day-to-day life as a large animal veterinarian. Keep enjoying the job, keep inspiring people, and it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Tommy. And you.
Thank you. Super.